Have you ever been watching your favorite influencers online and gone, oh my goodness, he really likes that product, doesn't he? He or she, I should say. And well, you have to stop and think about the fact that there may be good reasons that they have to like that product. What am I talking about? Well, I'm going to really get into this subject in this video, particularly and probably exclusively in the context of the automotive influencer. Now, first of all, before we get into any of this, first of all, I've got to make this absolutely clear right at the top. This is not a rant against influencers in any sense whatsoever. Many of them are in fact really brilliant at what they do. They're extremely talented, they're very hardworking, and they're very skilled at how they build the numbers and how they grow their audiences. So they're extremely good. And it takes, as somebody who sort of straddles the sphere of working on, journalism, but also kind of the influencer arena, which is of course the social media platforms, I know just how much hard work and effort it takes to even produce the content, never mind to then build up the sort of audiences that they manage to accrue. So it's extraordinary what they do. And in fact, as you will know, I've written a book on, it's hidden there at the back, but I'll put it on the screen. I've written a book on automotive content creation, and I've called it How to Be an Automotive Content Creator, Motoring Journalist, and Car Influencer. I normally shorten it to How to Be an Automotive Content Creator. But in this video, I want to talk about the fact that there is a distinction. There is a distinction between being an influencer and being a journalist. Now, you can be both, which is kind of what I am, but primarily it depends on, what your core is. And I think it's important to be aware of when you're consuming so much of this content, there are probably a couple of misconceptions or misunderstandings in the market, and they're at each extreme. And the kind of opposite ends of the scale. So I'm going to get into this, and I'm going to give you, actual reasons why, you need to be very wary of consuming the content. Consuming the content is fine, but how much credence and the value you give to that content, I think is the key thing here. And when you realize that you're not being influenced in a sense, but you're being sold to, I think you'll find it quite shocking. We'll get into that right after this.
A brown car guy. Brown car guy.
I'm sure sometimes you may have wondered when you have seen car reviews online, perhaps even when you've watched my car reviews, you've been wondering, is this a review or is this an ad? And sometimes, to be fair, it is hard to tell the difference. But I think what you need to do, you need to understand where the content is coming from and who is creating it. And I think that is core to understanding what that is and what that content actually is meant to be. Now, I'm basing this discussion on, I will not mention the brand because that's not really fair, because actually this applies to many brands out there, and a lot of people, a lot of car companies and a lot of other companies are doing the same sort of thing. But it's an event I went to yesterday, the well-known North London venue, and I found myself, I don't know whether through error, whether through incompetence, or whether through misjudgment, or whether through misunderstanding, placed in a wrong category. So I ended up being invited with the influencer crowd rather than the journalist crowd, which I then realized afterwards, subsequently, that they had been invited in the morning. You may have seen I put up a little video about this. I was very angry, I still am, and I found it very annoying, because what we do, what we need to do, what we need to get out of a car event is very different to what an influencer does, and also we're there for different reasons, and I'll explain what that means as well. So I found myself in this crowd, and I thought, well, this is a bit odd. This is a bit weird. I should have actually, the alarm bell should have started ringing, because the whole invitation, everything was a bit weird. It wasn't like normal. It wasn't like through a PR agency. It was through another agency. And instead of being issued passes, we were issued tickets, which I thought was very weird. But I thought, maybe that's a new way of doing things. And then they actually put they put a thing in there saying deliverables, and that kind of started to get me annoyed a little bit. I was like, deliverables? I'm sorry, but I decide what content I'm going to put out there, not you. You cannot stipulate that. But I thought, okay, fine. Well, maybe, I think it was just basically two Instagram stories and a post or something like that. And then, I tend to, as you know, if you follow me regularly, I go to an event, I tend to do more than that anyway. And I said, well, it doesn't really bother me. So let's see. On the morning of the actual event itself, another email came through. And this is the really interesting email. And this email not only reiterated the deliverables, but this email also set up some stipulations and some requirements. And that really that should have set the alarm bells ringing straight away. And they kind of did. And in fact, to be honest, I almost just didn't go at all that morning. I almost said, well, forget about it. I'm not going to go to this event. But then the curiosity got the better of me. And I thought, again, I had that thing in my head where maybe they've got this confused. I'll go down there, I'll talk to the PR, and I'll get it sorted, and we'll work this through. But I had already decided that I would go there to see the launch and to maybe report on the launch, but I would not review the car because that's how concerned I was about the stipulation. So there's a whole chart, a whole graphic that they send you, but I'm not going to go through the whole thing. It is interesting because some part of it literally tell you what you should be saying about the car. I won't go into too much details, and I'm trying hard not to give you the brand of the car as well. But here's a line that that really stood out to me. That actually not stood out to me, and the thing was, it was tacked onto the end of a paragraph. So almost innocuously just added to the end of a paragraph that you might have missed if you hadn't been reading it carefully. And right at the end, so there's a long paragraph that tells you, we encourage you to share your experiences, create your normal content in your authentic style, blah, 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 etc., etc. And then our goal is to showcase genuine, relatable stories that allow your audience to connect with your content. This is interesting. Allows your audience to connect with your real impressions and usage. Note that point. That's what it says. But then immediately after that full stop, the next sentence says, please refrain from intentionally negative or defamatory remarks about the brand. I understand defamatory, but intentionally negative? Well, if you don't like it, you don't like it. You should be able to say so, right? But this tells you that you can't do that. And there are 3 bullet points. I won't go into the bullet points, all of them. And actually, 2 of them are fine. Because actually, here's an interesting thing. And this is why it feels like they buried these instructions, because they top and tail it with stuff that's quite reasonable. But in the middle, there's that bit. And then the next bit immediately after that is avoid featuring other electric vehicle brands in the same frame or making direct comparisons. And then it goes on, do not drive recklessly and blah, blah, blah. And I'm used to going to car events and car launches where you have to sign an indemnity form, which basically says that, well, if you drive like an idiot and kill yourself, it's not our fault. And that's just fair enough, I've signed millions and millions of those in my career. But the reality is that never have I been told by a manufacturer, when you go to a media event or a launch event, that you can say this or you can't say this, or you must do it this way, you must do it that way. I'm sorry, but I will do what I want to do the way I want to do it. I've been doing this, as you will have read in my book if you bought a copy, for 35 years. I've been a motoring journalist since 1989, and my background is print journalism. And I have trained in newspapers, so I come from a journalistic background, but obviously I've evolved and I've grown and I've developed and I've obviously adapted to everything new that's come along. But the principles that I adhere to, the journalistic principles, still apply. So in everything that I do, I still do that. So, and again, like I said right at the beginning, you may have seen my reviews and you thought, well, does he love the car? I love all cars. I've said this before. I don't set out to be deliberately negative about any car. I don't. And to be honest with you, I could say that 15 years ago, I would say about 15 years ago, it was still just about possible to say, that's a great car, that's a good car, that's a terrible car. But now we have brackets where we have that's a great car, that's a good car, there are no terrible cars, because the level of engineering throughout the industry has got to such a level that there are no bad cars, let's be honest. And so for me as a journalist, it becomes about how does the car work for the purpose that it's intended and for the audience it's intended. And so for me, it's about trying to get you to understand if the car will be right and appropriate for your budgets, your needs, your lifestyle, etc. And this is the key thing. When they use the word influencer, I'm not saying that I'm annoyed at being called an influencer. I'm annoyed at being treated like an influencer. And the thing is, because influencer is another one of those words that's changed meaning, in the modern sense. But if you look at the actual word influencer, what does it actually mean? It means to influence, right? And I know for a fact that I am that, because I know over the years, and I have much anecdotal evidence to this, is that I have influenced people's decisions. You know, people have done stuff on the basis of what I've said. They have bought cars or not bought cars on the basis of what I have said. So I am an influencer in the true sense. But of course, what we're referring to here is influencers in the social media sense. Now, like I said, I mean, you know, again, this is not a rant against them, and this is really not their fault as well. This is nothing to do with them. This is to do with how, you know, the brands are organizing their media operations and their media activities. This is their mistake, not the influencers' mistake. Influencers are very good at what they're doing, which is building audiences, engaging those audiences, and then producing content, and you can't take anything away from them. But they're not motoring journalists, so when they go to a car event, they're not looking at it as a car. They're not understanding what the car is, who it's meant for, where it fits in the marketplace, what the budget is. Is it the correct price? Does it fit for the family requirement, or a single person's requirement, or an off-road requirement, or whatever it might be? They're not looking at it like that, right? Some of them are, because some of them, again, like myself, straddle both spheres, but those are the few. So those are the sort of dedicated car influencers, if you like, rather than the general influencers. And I'm certainly, like I said, you know, from that category, where I'm a motoring journalist first, who has also kind of straddled the sphere of influencing. So the point here is that so you now what you've learned is they are sometimes told almost literally what to say. They're almost force-fed it. Sometimes they are force-fed it, and they're told what they can't do. But there's another element to this. When I go to an event, when I go to a car launch or a car review or something like that, then I go as a journalist. I am not getting paid by the manufacturer, the media company, the agency, or any of them. I'm not getting paid by them. Okay, and you say, well, who are you getting paid to? And in my particular situation, and I think for a lot of independent content creators, this would be the case. If you are a working journalist, you're working for an outlet, so a magazine or a website or some other outlet, or, you know, whatever, you're obviously paid a salary. So you're paid by them to go and do your job, and this is your job, and you could never ever take money or anything. And many of those companies will stipulate that you cannot even accept gifts from these people. And certainly when we go on car launches, I must be transparent. Often the transport will be paid for, accommodation will be paid for, dinner will be paid for. So you're looked after and everything like that. But to be honest, the way I see it is that's just facilitating you to drive the car that they want you to drive, where they want you to drive it, or look at it if it's just a static launch, and so it behoves them to make sure that they facilitate you doing that, but they in no way pay you or tell you what to say about it. As a journalist, you do not get force-fed that, and you are free to go away and then create whatever content you like and say whatever the hell you want to say about that car or that product. So this is what you've got to understand. That this is the difference. So and then you're probably thinking, well, how do I get paid? How do independent journalists get paid? Well, we don't, literally. And so literally our entire purpose, our entire raison d'etre, if you like, is to service you, our audience. So we go out there and we spend the time and the effort. And to be honest, at the end of the day, it ends up costing us money, really, as independent content creators, because, you know, we're paying for fuel, we're paying for parking, we're paying for traveling, we're paying for trains, you know, whatever. We may be paying for food or sustenance or whatever, or literally if you just even factor the time out that we're having to take to go off and do something, and you have to factor all of those in, and the reality is that it's costing us negatively to produce the content and to bring it to you. The reality is that we don't get paid to produce this content. Theoretically, what you're thinking is, oh, well, you're a YouTuber, you make money off YouTube. The reality is, and I'll be absolutely straightforward with you, is that yes, you get a trickle feed of money that comes in from YouTube, but it barely covers even your base costs, you know. And the reality is, each of your videos on YouTube need to be hitting a 50, 60,000 each, and you need to be producing at least 10 of them a month to make anywhere near the sort of income that you might be able to survive on. So this is why, you know, through my channel, obviously, I always ask you to subscribe. I always ask you to view. The more you view, the more the revenue goes up on the YouTube. And then I suggest, you know, supporting me on Ko-fi.com, on Patreon.com, or even by subscribing right here on YouTube, and of course buying my books, because this is how I try to supplement my income as a content creator, so that I can continue to bring you this content. And of course the main thing that I do is I freelance for other platforms, so I can create content for other platforms, or write articles and what have you. And then that helps me to continue doing this. However, to be honest with you, it's really, really difficult. And sometimes you do have to go, well, is it even worth it? So Hope you're enjoying this video. Make sure to hit like, share, and subscribe if you're not already doing so. And support independent automotive journalism channels like mine. You can do that at patreon.com, coffee.com, or taking out a subscription right here on YouTube. Or you know what, better still, you can go and buy my books. I've got 3 books out now. They're all on Amazon. They're all available to buy. More details on this are in the description, but buying any of these books will certainly help. Thanks so much for watching. So that's the difference. So we are doing this as journalists because we feel duty bound to go and review something and bring you the information that we can as best as we can with the best interpretation that we can of that information. An influencer very, very often is paid to be at that event. And a lot of them, and in fact, from what I know, a lot of them at this event were being paid as well. So, and in some cases, I know this for a fact, and this has been the case for many years, that normally, like when I get an invite from a manufacturer, I look at it, I look at the dates, I look if I can do it, I look if it makes sense to my audience, I look if it's feasible for me to do, and then I respond, and then I go, yes, I'll do it, or sorry, I can't do this one, maybe catch you in the next one, etc., etc. When an influencer, a professional influencer, gets an invite like that, what they do is they say, well, they either pass it on to their agent, which probably they normally have, their business manager or the agent, or they'll send their rate card ahead and say, well, these are my rates. And this is what I'll give you. So each post will cost you this or whatever, you know. And that's very often how this is working. So they are actually literally being paid to be there. So that is a fundamental difference. So they're actually being paid to produce that content. And so this is what discerning viewers must understand. This is not to say that you should not view influencer content or journalistic content. You can view whatever you like, whatever you enjoy. Go for it. There's tons of great content out there. Consume it all. Support your favorite creators. Enjoy it. But just discern the difference between what a journalist is trying to do, which is help you with bringing you unbiased, or their own biases, if you like. We all have biases, but unbranded or unpaid for, if you like, information and opinion of the car, as opposed to an influencer which is just being force-fed and paid to create content and pass it on to you. So this is the key thing. This is what you've got to understand, that this is how the media industry is working. And also the balance of scale has been tipped right now in the favor of that latter kind, that paid for content. So there's a ton of that out there, and you really need to be aware of the fact that it's out there. So like I said, you know, I'm not saying don't consume it, I'm not saying don't support your favorite content creators, influencers, journalists, whoever. You should, absolutely you should, but I just want you to be aware of how this works, and I want you to be aware of where you can get genuine content and where you get content that is literally packaged for you to consume. Anyway, I hope this made sense, and I hope that that has been able to sort of expose a little bit more of how media currently works and what's really going on behind the scenes. And I hope that in some way this enables you to make better decisions about the content that you're consuming and how you react to that content, and also think about supporting independent automotive journalism and channels such as mine. Thanks so much for watching, and I'll catch you all in the next video. Running a business these days, especially if you're a one-man army, is exhausting. Believe me, I can tell you all about it. From getting new clients to chasing payments to creating the content, it can be chaos. That's why I want to tell you about my friends at Strategency. Now, they help solopreneurs and small business owners, especially folks in the car scene, automate, scale, and actually grow their business. Websites, content strategy, Instagram, WhatsApp, it's all sorted. If you're ready to go from being overwhelmed to in control, book a 15-minute consult at the link in the description and tell them Brown Car Guy sent you. Shout out time, guys. Thank you so much. Hey, if you enjoy my content, why not get involved? Buy me a coffee. You can do that at either of these links. Or if you're watching on YouTube, buy me a thanks or take out a membership. It all helps. It really does.